All right, hopefully you've recovered from the mistake I made. Now we're going to try number 17. So what would happen to the width of the interval if we change the standard deviation? So in the previous example, number 7, we found that if we change the confidence level, that affects the width of the interval, such that if the confidence level goes up, the width of the interval also increases. Now we're going to look at what happens if we change the standard deviation, how that affects the width. So we're going to change the sample standard deviation, S, to 0.78, and we're going to once again do the math to find the 2SD confidence interval. So once again, I would strongly recommend that you try this for yourself and see if you can come up with the correct answer. We're doing, since our variable is quantitative, x bar, the statistic, plus or minus 2 times s over radical n, the standard deviation of the null distribution. So my x bar value has not changed, only my s value has changed from 1.05 to 0.78. My n sample size is still 150. So I'm going to work this through one piece at a time. First, I'm going to do the SD of the null distribution, and when you take 0.78 divided by the square root of 150, you should get 0.0637. Then, if you multiply that by 2, you should get 0.1274. And I will just again note for the record that the 0.1274 is in fact the margin of error for the confidence interval. Then I'm going to take care of the plus or minus. I'm going to do the subtraction on the left and the addition on the right. And again, I hope that you're doing these for yourself. I'll try not to make any more mistakes. When you do the subtraction, you should get 2.1026. When you do the addition, you should get 2.3574. Those were the wrong numbers that I did in the previous example. And that is our 95% confidence interval. We could interpret this interval, but we don't have to. It will be very similar to the previous interpretation. We would just change the two numbers at the very end. But I would like us to find the midpoint of this interval. So again, to find the midpoint, we take the high value, add the low value. Once we've gotten the answer to the addition, we divide that by 2, and you should once again get 2.23. The x bar, sample statistic, sample mean, is at the midpoint of the interval. Then I'd like us to calculate the width of the interval. That is, we take the high value, 2.3574, minus the low value, 2.1026, and you should get 0.2548, the width that I incorrectly stated in the previous example. And then we can double check on the margin of error by taking the width and dividing it by 2. So if you take 0.2548 and you divide that by 2, you should get 0.1274, which is the margin of error that I stopped to point out when we were creating the confidence interval. Okay, so the question is, how did the width of the 95% confidence interval change? So let's go back. With the original sample standard deviation of 1.05, the width of the interval was 0.343. Double checking, that's what it was. Now we've changed the sample standard deviation and said suppose it was 0.78, so it's smaller. What happens to the width? Well, now the width is 0.2548. So the standard deviation of the sample has decreased from 1.05 down to 0.78. And the width of the 95% confidence interval has also gone down from 0.343 to 0.2548. So as the sample standard deviation decreased, the width of the interval also decreased.